when disgraced surgeon Dr. Mira Blackwood meets mysterious fugitive Adrian Reeves in her underground clinic. Neither expects their lives to become entangled in a deadly conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of government. What starts as a simple medical emergency becomes a heart-pounding race against time to save innocent children from a monster who uses their lives as leverage. Story time, fam. And this one is dripping with romance, secrets, and one unforgettable twist. Let's jump straight into it. Asterisk, the rain hammered against the windows of the abandoned warehouse like bullets from heaven, each drop a reminder that even God had turned violent. Dr. Mira Blackwood pressed her back against the cold brick wall, her surgical gloves slick with blood that wasn't hers. The man on the makeshift operating table groaned, his chest rising and falling in ragged gasps. "Stay with me," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to him or herself. 3 years ago she had been operating in pristine hospitals under fluorescent lights, saving lives with the backing of insurance companies and medical boards. Now she worked in shadows, her medical license stripped, her reputation destroyed by one devastating mistake that haunted her every sleeping moment. The underground clinic she ran served those who couldn't afford to be seen, couldn't risk questions, couldn't trust anyone else. The warehouse door exploded inward with a crash that made her heart stop. Rain swept in with the wind, and through the storm stepped a figure that seemed carved from darkness itself. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the fluid grace of a predator. Despite the obvious pain etched into every line of his body, his left arm hung useless at his side, blood seeping through his black shirt. "I need a doctor," he said, his voice like gravel scraped across steel. Myra's hands never stopped working on her current patient, but her eyes tracked the stranger. "Take a number. I'm busy keeping this man alive." He stepped closer, and she caught sight of his face in the flickering light of her battery-powered lamp. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and eyes the color of a winter storm. But it was the scar running from his left temple to his jaw that made her pause. She'd seen scars like that before. Knife wounds, close combat. "Yeah, this can't." "Wait," he said, and something in his tone made her blood run cold. "Nothing ever can." She finished stitching the bullet wound in her patient's shoulder and stepped back. "Marcus, help him to the recovery corner. Keep pressure on that bandage." The stranger was already moving toward her table, peeling off his shirt with his good arm. The sight of him made her breath catch, not from attraction, but from professional horror. His torso was a roadmap of violence, scars layering over scars, old wounds that had healed crooked, burns that spoke of torture rather than accident. "Jesus," she breathed. "What are you? Someone who pays in cash and asks no questions?" He settled onto the table, his muscles coiled like a spring ready to snap. "Can you say the same?" Mira pulled on fresh gloves, her training taking over even as alarm bells rang in her head. The wound in his shoulder was deep but clean, through and through. Gunshot. Recent. Still bleeding freely. "This happened tonight," she said, not a question. "Does it matter?" She threaded her needle, the familiar motions calming her racing pulse. "Depends on whether whoever shot you is coming here next." Laugh was bitter as winter wind. "They're already dead." The words hung between them like a blade. Mira had treated drug dealers, gang members, people running from immigration services. But this man radiated something different, something that made her hands want to shake. "Local anesthetic?" she asked. "No, this is going to hurt." "Everything hurts." His storm-gray eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Pain and I are old friends." She began to work, her needle sliding through skin and muscle with practiced precision. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound. Just watched her with those unnerving eyes, as if he could see straight through to her soul. "You're good at this," he said after several minutes of silence. "I used to be better." The words slipped out before she could stop them. "What happened?" Mira's hand stilled for just a moment. The memories crashed over her like a riptide. The operating room. Child on the table. A split-second decision that had saved one life and condemned another. The lawsuits. The media frenzy. The mother's screams echoing through the courthouse. I made a choice, she said finally, resuming her stitching. The wrong one, according to everyone else. According to you? She met his gaze, surprised by the gentleness in his voice. I saved a little girl's life. Her brother died because I chose her first. A medical board decided that made me unfit to practice medicine. But you still practice. In the shadows. For people like she gestured at his scarred body. People. Like you. People like me don't deserve saving. The certainty in his voice made her stop working entirely. Everyone deserves saving. His smile was sharp enough to draw blood. You haven't met everyone, Doc. Dr. Blackwood, she corrected automatically. And you are? For a long moment, he said nothing. The rain continued its assault on the windows, and somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed their lonely song. Finally, he spoke. Call me Kane. It wasn't his real name. She could tell by the way he said it, like he was trying on a coat that didn't quite fit. But she had learned not to push for truth in this place. Truth was a luxury neither of them could afford. Well, Kane, she said, tying off the last stitch, you'll live, though next time maybe consider a different line of work. There won't be a next time. Something in his voice made her look up sharply. His face had gone cold, distant, as if he had retreated somewhere she couldn't follow. What does that mean? Before he could answer, the lights went out. The warehouse plunged into absolute darkness, and Mira heard the unmistakable sound of weapons being cocked. Multiple weapons. Kane's hand shot out, finding her wrist in the dark. His grip was iron, his voice barely a whisper. Stay close to me, Doc. And whatever happens next, don't trust anyone who walks through that door. Outside, footsteps echoed. Through the rain like a death march. And Mira realized that her patient wasn't the only one whose life hung in the balance tonight. The darkness swallowed them whole, but Myra's other senses sharpened like knives. She could hear Kane's controlled breathing beside her, could smell the metallic temps of blood mixed with gunpowder and rain. His hand on her wrist was steady, warm, completely at odds with the violence radiating from his body. How many? She whispered. 6. Maybe 7. His voice was so low, she felt it more than heard it. Stay behind me. The front door exploded inward, wood splintering like bones. It's a flashlight. Beams cut through the darkness, creating a deadly light show as armed figures poured into her sanctuary. Mira's heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized the tactical gear, the military precision of their movements. Where is he? The voice belonged to a woman, sharp and commanding. I know you're here, Adrian. Shh. Adrian? So Kane wasn't even close to his real name. The man beside her went rigid, every muscle coiled for violence. Run, he breathed against her ear. Like exit now. But Mira couldn't move. This was her clinic, her life's work. These people were destroying everything she had built from nothing. Dr. Blackwood. The woman's voice cut through the darkness like a scalpel. We know you're here too. Step into the light. A beam found her face, blinding her. She raised a hand to shield her eyes, squinting against the glare. The woman behind the light was tall, blonde, beautiful in the way that weapons were beautiful, lethal and precise. Agent Sarah Cross, FBI, the woman said, though something about her felt wrong. Too polished, too dangerous. Oh. You're harboring a fugitive. I'm treating a patient, Myra said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. That's what doctors do. Agent Cross smiled, and it was like watching a snake bare its fangs. Not doctors who lost their licenses for malpractice. You're running an illegal medical operation. Kane stepped into the light beside Myra, his wounded arm tucked against his side, but his posture radiating menace. Hello, Sarah. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Agent Cross's smile faltered for just a moment before returning twice as sharp. Adrian, you look terrible. Prison will do that to a man. You weren't supposed to get out for another 15 years. Kane's laugh was like breaking glass. Plans change. Mira's mind raced. Prison, FBI. This wasn't some street criminal she'd patched up. This was something bigger, more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. You killed 12 people getting out, Agent Cross continued, her weapon trained on Kane's chest. 12 good agents. 12 corrupt agents, Kane corrected. There's a difference. The families of the dead don't think so. The families of the dead don't know their loved ones were selling government secrets to the highest bidder. The words hit the air like a bomb. Mira felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Government secrets, corruption, she was in deeper than she'd ever intended to be. Agent Cross's face twisted with something that might have been pain or rage. You always were a self-righteous bastard, even when we were partners, especially when we were sleeping together. The words hung in the air like poison. Mira saw the truth written in the tension between them, in the way Agent Cross's hand trembled just slightly on her weapon. This wasn't just professional, this was personal. You used me, Agent Cross said, her voice barely controlled. Made me fall in love with you while you were building your case against my team. Your team was selling American assets to foreign governments. People died because of that intelligence. People died because of you. Agent Cross's mask slipped entirely, revealing raw fury underneath. You destroyed everything. My career, my life, my faith in anything good. Kane stepped forward, ignoring the weapons trained on him. Some things deserved to be destroyed. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Kane stumbled backward, blood spreading across his chest in a dark stain. But he didn't go down. Instead, he smiled. Still a terrible shot, Sarah. Agent Cross's eyes widened in shock, then fury. That was center mass. Kevlar, Kane said simply, though it still hurts like hell. The distraction was all he needed. Kane moved like lightning despite his injuries, closing the distance between them in 2 steps. His good arm wrapped around Agent Cross's throat while his other hand stripped the weapon from her grip, the other agent shouted, but couldn't get a clear shot. Here's what's going to happen, Kane said, his voice deadly calm. You're going to call off your dogs and walk away forever. Never. Agent Cross struggled against his hold, her face turning red. I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth. No, Kane said, and Mira heard something break in his voice. You won't. The needle appeared in his hand like magic, pulled from Mira's medical supplies. Before anyone could react, he plunged it into Agent Cross's neck. She convulsed once, then went limp. What did you give her? Mira demanded, her medical training overriding her fear. Sedative. She'll sleep for 12 hours. Kane released the unconscious woman, letting her crumple to the floor. It's long enough for us to disappear. The other agents rushed forward, but Kane was already moving, pulling Mira toward the back of the warehouse. Unless you want to spend the rest of your life in federal prison, I suggest you come with me. I can't just abandon my clinic. Your clinic is blown. They'll tear this place apart looking for evidence. Gunshots erupted behind them, bullets whining off metal supports. Kane pushed her through the rear exit into the storm, rain immediately soaking them both to the skin. My car? Mira gasped, pointing to the rusted sedan parked in the alley. Keys. She tossed them to him, then realized her mistake when he fumbled the catch with his injured arm. They both dove for the keys as more agents poured out of the warehouse behind them. Kane's hand closed over hers on the metal, and for a moment, they were frozen, crouched in the rain, staring at each other. His eyes held secrets deep enough to drown in, and something that might have been regret. I'm sorry, he said, and she knew he meant for more than just the danger he'd brought to her door. Tell me later, she said, pulling her hand free and yanking open the driver's door. If we live that long, they threw themselves into the car just as bullets shattered the rear window. Mira gunned the engine, tires squealing on wet asphalt as they shot out of the alley onto the empty street. In the rearview mirror, she saw Agent Cross standing in the warehouse doorway. Very much awake, very much furious, speaking rapidly into a radio. The sedative, Mira said, understanding flooding through her. It wasn't real. Kane met her eyes in the mirror, and his smile was sharp enough to cut. Sarah always was too smart for her own good. She knew I'd never really hurt her. She doesn't know that you know she knows, exactly. Mira gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles white. What the hell have you gotten me into? Kane settled back against the passenger seat, pressing a hand to his bleeding shoulder. The kind of war where the only way to survive is to become someone you never wanted to be. Behind them, black SUVs pulled into the street, their headlights cutting through the storm like searchlights. The hunt had begun, and Mira realized that the woman she used to be, the doctor who believed in healing and saving lives, was about to die tonight. The question was, what would rise from her ashes? The safe house sat like a broken tooth against the skyline, one of dozens of abandoned buildings in the industrial district that the city had forgotten. Mira wrapped her arms around herself as they climbed the concrete stairs, their footsteps echoing in the hollow space. Kane moved ahead of her, his injured arm bound in a makeshift sling she'd fashioned from her torn jacket. "How long have you had this place?" she asked, trying to fill the silence that pressed against them like a living thing. 2 years, ever since I started planning my escape. The apartment on the 4th floor was sparse, but functional. A bed, a table, shelves lined with canned food and medical supplies. The windows were boarded up except for small gaps that allowed slivers of city light to paint patterns on the walls. Kane sank onto the bed with a grimace, and Mira moved automatically to check his bandages. The bleeding had stopped, but infection was always a risk. "You need antibiotics," she said, her fingers gentle against his skin. "I need answers." His good hand caught her wrist, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her movement. "Why did you really lose your license?" Mira pulled away, moving to the window to peer through one of the gaps. The street below was empty, but she knew that meant nothing. Agent Cross was out there somewhere, hunting them both. "I told you. I made the wrong choice during surgery." "Bullshit," she turned, surprised by the venom in his voice. Kane was sitting up straighter, his eyes boring into her with laser intensity. "I've read your file, Doc. Harvard Medical School. Top of your class, 5 years at Boston General with a spotless record. Surgeons like you don't just make wrong choices. You researched me? I researched everyone I might need to use." The word hit her like a slap. Use. Kane's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "That came out wrong." "No, I think it came out exactly right." Mira moved away from the window, anger building in her chest like a fire. "This wasn't random, was it? Didn't just stumble into my clinic tonight, Mira. Don't." She held up a hand. "Just tell me the truth. For once, tell me the goddamn truth." Kane was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. 3 months ago, I was rotting in a federal prison, serving a life sentence for treason I didn't commit. Then a man visited. Me called himself Mr. White. Said he could arrange my freedom. In exchange for what? Finding Dr. Mira Blackwood. It's a disgraced surgeon who'd been operating an underground clinic. The woman who could save his daughter's life. Mira's lungs in a rush. What? Kane stood, moving to a duffel bag in the corner. He pulled out a manila folder and tossed it onto the table. Inside were photographs, medical records, newspaper clippings, all featuring a 7-year-old girl with dark hair and serious eyes, White, born with a rare heart defect that conventional surgery can't fix. But there's an experimental procedure, something that only one surgeon in the world has attempted. Successfully. Mira's hands shook as she picked up the medical files. She recognized the condition immediately, remembered the long nights she'd spent developing the technique that could save children like this, the technique that had cost her everything when it went wrong. "The boy who died," she whispered, "during my last surgery, he had the same condition, but the girl lived, because of a choice you made in a split second under impossible circumstances. Mr. White has spent 2 years looking for you, and he sent a convicted killer to bring me to him." Kane's jaw tightened. "I'm not a killer. 12 agents are dead because of you. 12 corrupt agents who were selling state secrets to the highest bidder, who got my partner killed, framed me for treason and locked me away to silence me. Your partner." Kane's face went blank, but not before Mira caught a glimpse of raw pain in his eyes. "Detective Maria Santos. 3 years, my partner. The best cop I ever knew. The only person who believed in me when everyone else thought I'd gone rogue. What happened to her? She got too close to the truth? They made it look like a drug deal gone wrong." His voice turned to ice. I held her while she bled out in some filthy alley, and the last thing she said was my name, like she was asking me to fix it. The weight of his grief filled the small space, making it hard to breathe. Mira understood that kind of loss, the way it carved holes in your chest that never healed. So you escaped to get revenge. I escaped to get justice. There's a difference, is there? She moved closer, studying his face in the dim light. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're using a sick child to manipulate me into helping you finish what you started. Kane's expression cracked, and for a moment, she saw through his armor to the broken man underneath. Yes, the simple honesty of it hit her harder than any lie could have. But he continued, that little girl is going to die without you. Her father may be a bastard who traffics in human lives like they're commodities, but she's innocent. And she's running out of time. Mira sank into the single chair, her head in her hands. How long does she have? 3 weeks? Maybe less. And if I do this, if I save her, what happens to me? Do I disappear? Do I become another loose end for Mr. White to tie up? Kane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer. I won't let that happen. Why? She looked up at him, searching his face for some clue to the truth. Why would you protect me? Because, he said, and something in his expression made her heart skip. You're the first person in 3 years who looked at me and saw something worth saving. The moment hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Then Kane's head snapped toward the window, every line of his body going tense. They found us. Mira heard it then, the soft whisper of footsteps on the stairs below. Multiple sets, moving with practiced silence. Back window, Kane said, already moving. Fire escape. What about Emma White? Kane paused, his hand on the window latch. What about her? If we run now, she dies. If we stay, we both die. Mira stood, her decision crystallizing like ice in her veins. Then we don't stay, but we don't run either. What are you talking about? She moved to her medical bag, pulling out a small device that looked like a cell phone. GPS tracker. I plant these on patients who might not follow up for post-operative care. Kane's eyes widened with understanding. You want to track them? I want to find Mr. White. If he wants his daughter saved, he can damn well come to us. The footsteps were closer now, almost to their floor. Kane stared at her for a moment, then grinned. It was the first genuine smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his entire face.
You're insane.
I'm a surgeon. Same thing. Kane opened the window just as the apartment door burst open. They slipped onto the fire escape as shouts erupted behind them, Agent Cross's voice rising above the others. Search everything. Find out where they're going. They climbed down through the rain, moving as quietly as possible. But as they reached the alley, Kane suddenly stopped. Mira, something in his voice made her look back. Agent Cross stood silhouetted. In the apartment window above, no longer shouting orders to her team. Instead, she was speaking quietly into a radio, and her words drifted down through the rain. Target acquired, or the doctor is with him. Initiate Protocol 7. Kane's face went white. No. What's Protocol 7? Kane grabbed her hand, pulling her into a run. It means Sarah isn't FBI. It means everything I thought I knew about who's hunting me is wrong. Then who is she? Kane's voice was barely audible over the rain and their pounding footsteps. She's working for Mr. White.
Oh.
The betrayal hit Mira like a physical blow. The man who wanted her to save his daughter had sent people to capture her. But why? What was she missing? They reached the mouth of the alley just as black SUVs screeched around the corner, headlights blazing. Kane pulled her behind a dumpster, both of them breathing hard. There's something else, Kane said, his voice tight with pain. Something I haven't told you about Emma White. What? Kane met her eyes, and she saw her own death reflected in them. She's not his daughter. She's his leverage. What does that mean? It means we're not just running from the FBI anymore, Doc. We're running from everyone. Above them, Agent Cross's voice echoed through the night, cold and final. Lock down the city? They don't leave alive. The abandoned subway tunnel stretched before them like the throat of some massive beast, swallowing their flashlight beam hole. Water dripped from rusted pipes overhead, each drop echoing in the darkness like a countdown timer. Mira pressed herself against the damp wall, trying to slow her racing heart while Kane checked their 6-4 pursuit. "Clear," he whispered, though tensions still coiled through his body like a live wire. They'd been running for 6 hours, moving through the city's forgotten veins while Agent Cross's people tore the surface apart looking for them. Mira's feet were bleeding inside her shoes, and exhaustion pulled at her bones like lead weights. "Tell me about Emma," she said once they'd caught their breath. "If she's not his daughter, then what is she?" Kane's face was lost in shadow, but she could feel his hesitation. "You're not going to like it. I stopped liking things about 6 hours ago." He pulled out his phone. The screen's glow harsh in the tunnel darkness. A few swipes brought up a photograph that made Mira's blood turn to ice. Emma White sat in what looked like a hospital bed, but the room around her was wrong. Too clean, too clinical. It's like a laboratory. "Mr. White doesn't just traffic in government secrets," Kane said quietly. "He traffics in people, children specifically." No, the word came out as barely a breath. Kids from wealthy families, political figures, anyone with something he can exploit. Emma isn't his daughter. She's his insurance policy. Mira felt sick. Insurance for what? Against people like me? Is anyone who gets too close to his operation? Kane's voice turned bitter. "He takes children who are already dying, kids whose families have exhausted every legal option. Then he offers them hope. Experimental treatments. Miracle cures. Using doctors who can't say no. Using doctors who have nothing left to lose." Kane's eyes found hers in the darkness. "Doctors like you?" The truth settled over her like a shroud. "He orchestrated my downfall. The malpractice case. The boy who died? Tommy Chen. His family was $50,000 in debt to Whites. People, the lawsuit that destroyed your career? White's lawyers handled it pro bono." Mira's legs gave out, and she slid down the tunnel wall until she was sitting in the damp. 3 years of guilt, 3 years of believing she'd failed as a doctor, and it had all been manipulation. "Why?" she whispered. "'Cause you were the only surgeon in the world who'd attempted the procedure Emma needs, not because broken people are easier to control." Kane knelt beside her, his good hand reaching out tentatively before pulling back. "I'm sorry. I know what it's like to have your whole world turned into a lie. How long have you known?" "Since yesterday. I found White's files during the prison break." He pulled a flash drive from his pocket. "Everything's on here. The trafficking. Ring the corrupt agents, the doctors he's coerced, your case file." Mira stared at the small device that contained the destruction of her life. "Why tell me now? Why not just deliver me to him like you were supposed to?" Kane was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw with something that might have been shame. "Because somewhere between watching you save that man's life and hearing you say everyone deserves saving, I remembered what it felt like to be human." The words hung between them in the tunnel darkness, more intimate than a touch. Mira reached for the flash drive, her fingers brushing his as she took it. "There's more," Kane said. "About Emma? More? She's not just randomly sick." White infected her deliberately with a engineered virus that mimics the heart defect. The horror of it crashed over Mira like a wave. "He's killing her to control me, and he's done it before. 17 other children over the past 5 years, all of them, died when their designated surgeons refused to cooperate." Mira closed her eyes, seeing those children's faces in her mind. 17 lives snuffed out because someone had said no. Because someone had chosen their principles over an innocent life. "I'm thinking about saving her," Kane said. "It wasn't a question, aren't you? I'm thinking about keeping you alive long enough to expose him, even if it means letting Emma die." Kane's silence was answer enough. Mira stood, surprising herself with how steady she felt. The weight of the decision settled over her shoulders like armor. "I need to see her, in person. That's suicide." "No, that's medicine. I don't operate blind." Kane grabbed her arm as she started to walk deeper into the tunnel. "Mira, listen. To me, White's compound is a fortress. Private security, military-grade surveillance, the whole thing. Getting in is a one-way trip. Then we don't get in. She turned to face him, her mind already working through possibilities. We make him bring her to us. How? Mira smiled, and it felt sharp as a scalpel. By giving him something he wants more than leverage. She pulled out her own phone, scrolling through contacts until she found the number she was looking for. When she hit call, Kane's eyes widened in shock. Dr. Blackwood. The voice on the other end was smooth, cultured, tinged with the kind of accent that came from expensive schools and exclusive clubs. Mr. White, I believe you have something that belongs to me. A pause. I'm afraid I don't follow. My reputation, my career, my life. Mira kept her voice steady, professional. You orchestrated my fall from grace to make me desperate enough to work for you. Congratulations, it worked. I see you've been talking to Mr. Kane. Talking to Adrian Reeves, the man you broke out of prison to kidnap me. Another pause, longer this time. And what do you propose we do about this situation? We'll save your daughter, but not as your prisoner, as your equal. Kane was shaking his head violently, but Mira ignored him. You have 1 hour to bring Emma to the old St. Mary's Hospital. On 5th Street, the surgical suite on the 3rd floor. Come alone or find another surgeon. Dr. Blackwood, I'm afraid you're not in a position to make demands. Actually, I am, because Agent Cross just confirmed that you're using federal resources for a personal vendetta. That's treason, Mr. White. And I have proof. The silence stretched so long Mira thought he'd hung up. Then quietly, 1 hour, the line went dead. Kane stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Do you have any idea what you just did? Just guaranteed that Emma gets the surgery she needs? You just signed our death warrants. White will never let us walk away from this. Mira shouldered her medical bag, checking to make sure she had everything she needed. Then we'd better make sure we save her life first. Kane stood slowly, favoring his injured arm. There's something else about Emma. What now? Kane's expression was haunted. She's not the only child he's holding. There are others, kids he's keeping sick to control their families. The magnitude of it hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't just about one little girl. This was about breaking a monster who fed on innocent blood. How many others? At least 6 that I found files for. Probably more. Mira felt something cold and hard crystallize in her chest. The woman who had entered that warehouse tonight, the doctor who just wanted to help people heal, was gone. Her place stood someone else. Someone who understood that sometimes healing required cutting out the infection entirely. Then we saved them all. Kane stared at her, and something shifted in his expression. Something that looked like respect. Or maybe recognition. This isn't going to end with surgery, you know that, right? I know White won't just let us expose him and walk away. When this is over, one of us is going to have to make sure he never hurts another child. Mira met his eyes, seeing her own determination reflected there. When this is over, we both will. As they made their way toward the tunnel exit, Kane's voice stopped her. Mira, when we get to that hospital, when you're operating on Emma, I need you to know something. What? If it comes down to saving her or saving you, I'm choosing you. The words hung in the damp air between them, heavy with promise and threat. Mira turned to look at him, this man who had crashed into her life like a meteor, bringing destruction and possibility in equal measure. Let's make sure it doesn't come to that. But as they climbed toward the street level, both of them knew that in wars like this, someone always paid the ultimate price. The only question was who would make the sacrifice, and whether it would be enough to save the innocent lives hanging in the balance. Above them, the city waited, and somewhere in its heart, a monster prepared to meet them in the place where healing and killing lived side by side. St. Mary's Hospital rose from the urban decay like a monument to forgotten hope, its broken windows staring out at the city like dead eyes. The building had been abandoned for 5 years, but Mira knew its halls better than her own apartment. She'd done her residency here, back when she still believed medicine was about healing rather than survival. Kane checked his weapon for the 3rd time. As they approached the main entrance, "You sure the power still works? Emergency generators?" They keep the surgical suites functional for situations exactly like this. Mira pushed through the heavy doors, inhaling the familiar smell of antiseptic and decay. Third floor. Operating room 7. Their footsteps echoed in the empty corridors as they climbed the stairs. Kane moved with fluid grace despite his injured arm, but Mira could see the pain etched around his eyes. The bullet wound was worse than he'd admitted. "You need medical attention," she said as they reached the 3rd floor. After Kane, Adrian. He stopped walking, turning to face her in the dim emergency lighting. "My name is Adrian Reeves. If we don't make it out of this, I want you to know who you're dying with." The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. "We're not dying tonight." "No," he agreed, but something in his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. Operating room 7 looked exactly as she remembered it. The surgical table dominated the center of the space, surrounded by monitors and equipment that hummed with potential. Mira began her preparations, checking instruments, sterilizing surfaces, falling into the familiar rhythm that had once been her entire world. "How long since you've operated?" Adrian asked, watching her work. 3 years, 2 months, 16 days. The numbers fell from her lips automatically. "Not that I'm counting. Muscle memory doesn't forget," she said, testing the flexibility of her surgical gloves. "But hands do, hearts do." At exactly 1 hour, the elevator chimed. Myra's pulse jumped as footsteps approached down the hallway. Multiple sets, moving with military precision. The doors opened, and Mr. White stepped into the operating room like he owned it, which Mira realized he probably did. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 45, with silver hair and eyes like chips of Arctic ice. Behind him came 2 men in tactical gear, and between them, Emma White was carried on a stretcher, her small body dwarfed by the medical equipment surrounding her. Even from across the room, Mira could see the blue tinge to her lips, the labored rise and fall of her chest. The child was dying. "Dr. Blackwood," Mr. White said, his voice warm and conversational, as if they were meeting at a cocktail party rather than in an abandoned hospital. "Thank you for agreeing to see Emma. Let me examine her." Garce gestured to his men, who transferred Emma to the surgical table with surprising gentleness. "Though I should mention, we're not alone." Agent Cross stepped through the doorway, her weapon trained on Adrian. Behind her came 6 more operatives, all armed, all focused. "The prodigal partners reunited," White said with obvious amusement. "How touching." Mira ignored them all, focusing entirely on Emma. The child's eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. The heart monitor showed an irregular rhythm that made Mira's own heart skip. "How long has she been like this?" she asked, her hands already working to assess the damage. 2 weeks, White replied. "Since you proved so elusive." The implication hit her like a slap. He'd made Emma sicker to force Mira's compliance. "You bastard," Adrian snarled, taking a step forward before Agent Cross's weapon stopped him. Now, White said mildly. "Let's keep this professional, Dr. Blackwood. You have everything you need to save Emma's life. The procedure should take approximately 4 hours, and then—" White's smile was sharper than surgical steel. "Then you and Mr. Reeves disappear. Permanently." Myra's hands stilled on Emma's chest. "You're going to kill us regardless." "I'm going to tie up loose ends." "Surely you understand the necessity." Adrian's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "What about the other children?" But White's expression flickered, just for a moment. "The 6 kids you're holding? The ones you've infected to control their families." White's mask slipped entirely, revealing something cold and predatory underneath. "Agent Cross, please remove Mr. Reeves from the operating room. His presence is distracting." "No." Mira stepped between them, her voice carrying the authority she'd once wielded in hospitals across the country. "He stays. I need an assistant." "Blackwood, I'm afraid that's not negotiable." "Then neither is the surgery." Mira crossed her arms, staring down the most dangerous man she'd ever met. "Emma dies, and your leverage dies with her." The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Finally, White nodded to Agent Cross, who lowered her weapon slightly. You have 4 hours, White said. Don't test my patience. As White and his people retreated to observe from the viewing gallery above, Mira began her preparations in earnest. She'd performed this procedure exactly once before, on the boy who'd died. But that failure had taught her things that success never could. Talk to me, she said to Adrian, as she made the first incision. Keep me grounded. What do you want to know? How did you really end up in prison? Adrian was quiet for a moment. Monitoring Emma's vitals? I was undercover in White's organization for 2 years. Deep cover, so deep that when things went wrong, my own agency thought I'd gone rogue. Things went wrong how? Maria, my partner. She was supposed to be my extraction. A point when the operation concluded, but White had turned her handler. When she came to get me out, she walked into a trap. Ira's hands worked steadily, opening Emma's chest with practiced precision. She knew it was a trap. How do you know that? Because she went anyway. People don't risk their lives for corrupt partners. Adrian's voice cracked slightly. She told me she loved me the night before she died. I never got to say it back. You're saying it now. The heart was smaller than... Her fists malformed and struggling. But Mira could see the solution. The delicate reconstruction that would give this child a chance at life. Her hands moved with increasing confidence, muscle memory taking over. Adrian? Yeah? When this is over, when we get Emma and the other children out, what happens to us? What do you mean? Do we just walk away? Go back to hiding in the shadows? Adrian met her eyes over Emma's still form. Is that what you want? Mira considered the question as she worked to repair the child's damaged heart. What did she want? 3 years ago, she'd wanted to save lives. Tonight, she wanted to save lives and destroy the monster who fed on innocent blood. I want to finish what you started, she said finally, even if it means becoming someone you never thought you'd be. I became that person the moment I walked into your life. Above them, in the viewing gallery, she could see White's silhouette against the glass, watching, waiting, planning their deaths. There's something else, Adrian said quietly. Something I found in White's files about you. Died, Tommy Chen. He wasn't random. Mira's hands stilled for just a moment. What do you mean he was White's son? The words hit her like a physical blow. The child whose death had destroyed her career, whose face haunted her dreams, had been the son of the man orchestrating her downfall. That's impossible. Illegitimate son. Hidden from the world. White sacrificed his own child to trap you. The operating room spun around her. All this time she'd been carrying the guilt of failing a patient, but the patient's father had wanted him to die. He killed his own son to get to me, and he'll kill Emma too, the moment you're done with her. Unless what? Adrian's eyes were steel in the surgical lighting, unless we make sure he never gets the chance. Mira looked down at Emma's exposed heart, so small and fragile in her hands. This child deserved life. They all did. But saving her wouldn't be enough. Not when 6 other children were counting on them to be more than just healers. The other kids? Where is he keeping them? Basement level, sublevel 3. Medical containment. Security, 12 guards, maybe 15. All armed. Mira nodded, her decision crystallizing like ice in her veins. How long do you need? For what? To get them out. Understanding dawned in Adrian's eyes. You're going to let me go after them while you stay here? Someone has to finish Emma's surgery. Someone has to make sure White believes everything is going according to plan. Someone has to face him when he realizes we've destroyed everything he's built. That someone is me. Adrian shook his head. I won't leave you here alone. You will, Mira said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded operating rooms and saved impossible lives. Because those children don't have anyone else. Because Maria Santos died to expose him, and her sacrifice has to mean something, Mira. Because I'm not asking you to leave me. I'm asking you to trust me. The heart monitor beeping in the background seemed to count down the seconds until their world changed forever. Adrian stared at her across Emma's still form, and she saw the moment he understood. This wasn't just about saving the children. This was about making sure White never hurt anyone. Again, When you see him, Adrian said quietly, when you tell him what we've done, remember something. What? You're not the same woman who lost her license 3 years ago? You're stronger now, harder, and you're not the same man who went to prison. For a crime he didn't commit. No, Adrian agreed. I'm the man who's going to make sure justice finally gets served. As Adrian disappeared into the shadows to hunt monsters, Mira turned back to Emma's heart, her hands steady as stone. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky like the footsteps of approaching gods, and she knew that before the night was over. Either justice would prevail, or they would all burn together in the fire of White's empire. The real surgery was just beginning. The heart monitor's steady beeping was the only sound in the operating room as Mira completed the final sutures on Emma's chest. 4 hours of surgery, 4 hours of rebuilding what disease and evil had tried to destroy. Strong and regular now, pink blooming in her cheeks as oxygen flowed freely through repaired vessels. Beautiful work. White's voice came from directly behind her. Mira didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge his presence as she cleaned her instruments. She lived. Full recovery expected within 6 weeks. Excellent, and the other children. Now she did turn, meeting his cold eyes with steel in her own. What other children? White's smile was patient, indulgent. Please, Dr. Blackwood, did you really think I wouldn't notice Mr. Reeves slipping away? Or that my security cameras wouldn't track him through the building? Ice formed in Myra's veins. Where is he? Sublevel 3. With Agent Cross and my associates. Learning the price of heroism. White moved to Emma's bedside, his hand gentle on the sleeping child's forehead. The tenderness of the gesture was somehow more terrifying than any threat. You see, Doctor, I don't actually need Emma anymore. She served her purpose. She brought you here, forced you to reveal your capabilities. Now I have something far more valuable. What? You, the surgeon who can fix what conventional medicine cannot, who operates in shadows and asks no questions, has already lost everything and has nothing left to bargain with. Mira's hand inched toward the surgical tray, where a scalpel lay gleaming under the lights. I won't work for you, but you will. White's voice remained conversational, pleasant, because I have 6 children downstairs who will die without your intervention. And now I have Mr. Reeves, who seems to have developed an inconvenient attachment to you. The monitor beside Emma's bed suddenly flatlined, the piercing alarm filling the room. Mira spun toward the child, but her training told her immediately what had happened. Someone had disconnected the leads. A demonstration, White said calmly as his men moved to flank Mira, of how quickly things can change. But the alarm wasn't coming from Emma's monitor. It was coming from the building's fire suppression system. Red lights bathed the operating room as water began to rain from the sprinklers overhead. What the hell? White snarled, spinning toward the door. The explosion came from below, a rumble that shook the entire building. Then another. Then the lights went out completely, leaving them in darkness broken only by the red emergency strobes. He's bringing the whole place down, White breathed, and for the first time Mira heard fear in his voice. Adrian's voice crackled through. The building's intercom system, distorted but unmistakably triumphant. White, you have 60 seconds to get to the parking garage before this building becomes your tomb. The children, Mira said, moving toward Emma, White's hand slammed against her chest, stopping her. Leave her. She's a child. She's a tool that's outlived its usefulness. Rage flooded through Mira like molten steel. Without thinking, her hand closed around the scalpel and drove it deep into White's shoulder. He screamed, stumbling backward. As blood poured down his arm, "Run," she told his men, who were staring in shock. "Unless you want to die for him." They looked at White, then at the growing pool of blood, then at each other. One by one, they halted from the room. White pressed his hand against the wound, his face twisted with pain and fury. "You have no idea what you've done. I've stopped. A monster. You've killed us all." Another explosion rocked the building, closer this time. Mira scooped Emma into her arms, the child's weight nothing compared to the burden of choice she'd carried for 3 years. "Maybe," she said, moving toward the door. "But at least we'll die clean." White's laughter followed her into the hallway. High and broken, clean. You think any of this is clean? You've killed my son, Doctor. Tommy Chen, my beautiful boy. Mira stopped walking. You let him die. I needed him to die. For the greater good, for the empire I was building. Do you have any idea what it cost me to watch him slip away on your table? Everything, Mira said quietly. It cost you everything, including your soul. The elevator shaft was filled with smoke, but the stairs were still passable. Mira ran. Down flights of concrete steps, Emma's unconscious weight growing heavier with each level. Behind her, she could hear White following, his breathing labored but determined. She burst through the door to the parking garage just as another explosion sent chunks of concrete raining from the ceiling. Adrian stood beside a stolen ambulance. Blood streaming from a cut on his forehead, 6 children clustered around him like broken birds. Mira. He started toward her, then stopped as White emerged from the stairwell behind her. How touching, White gasped, one hand still pressed to his shoulder wound. A reunion. Agent Cross materialized from behind a concrete pillar, her weapon trained on Adrian's head. Drop your gun, Adrian. It's over. Sarah, don't do this. I have to. You know I have to. But Adrian was looking at Mira, and she saw something in his eyes that made her understand. This had always been the plan, the real plan. The flash drive, she said. Adrian nodded slightly. In the ambulance, everything. White's operation, the corrupt agents, the children. All of it. Very good, White said, pulling a gun from his jacket with his uninjured arm. Now hand it over. Can't do that. White's face twisted with rage. Then you'll all die here. But the drive's already uploaded to every major news outlet in the country. Dead man's switch. If I don't check in every hour, the story goes live automatically. You're bluffing. Adrian's smile was sharp as broken glass. Am I? White's gun swung toward Emma and Mira's arms. I'll kill the child. No. Agent Cross said suddenly. Enough. Her weapon shifted from Adrian to White, and Mira saw the moment everything changed. The moment Sarah Cross remembered who she used. To be before corruption poisoned everything she touched. You killed 12 good agents tonight, Cross said, her voice steady, including my partner, including people I cared about. They were compromised, White snarled. They were loyal. To their country. To their oath. To me. Her finger tightened on the trigger. I was the one who was compromised. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. White's body hit the concrete with a wet sound, his blood spreading in a dark pool that reflected the emergency lights. Agent Cross lowered her weapon, her hand shaking. Adrian, children, they're safe. Medical transport is 2 minutes out. Us. Adrian looked at Mira, holding Emma's sleeping form, surrounded by 6 other children who would live because they'd chosen to fight rather than run. We disappear. New identities, new lives, together. The FBI will hunt us. Let them try. Cross nodded slowly. I'll buy you time. Clean up this mess. Make sure the story breaks clean. Sarah. Yeah, thank you. She smiled, and for a moment, she looked like the woman Adrian had once loved. Thank you for reminding me who I used to be. The medical transport arrived as the upper floors of the hospital began to collapse. Mira watched the children being loaded into ambulances, their faces pale but alive, and felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Peace. Any regrets? Adrian asked as they climbed into the last ambulance. Mira looked back at the burning building. At Agent Cross standing in the smoke like an avenging angel, at the ruins of White's empire crumbling into ash. Only one, she said. What? That it took me 3 years to remember that healing sometimes requires cutting out the infection. Adrian's hand found hers as the ambulance pulled away from the wreckage. Where do we go now? Mira squeezed his fingers, feeling calluses that spoke of violence and tenderness in equal measure. Somewhere we can save lives without hiding in the shadows. Together? Together. As the city lights blurred past the ambulance windows, Mira thought about redemption, about the price of doing what was right instead of what was easy, about the strange mathematics of sacrifice, where sometimes you had to lose everything too. Find out who you really were. Emma stirred in her arms, small fingers curling around Mira's thumb. The child's eyes opened, dark and serious and alive. Are you an angel? Emma whispered. Mira smiled, thinking of the blood on her hands, the violence she'd witnessed. The man beside her who'd killed to protect innocent lives. No, sweetheart, just a doctor. What's the difference? Mira looked at Adrian, who was watching her with something that might have been love burning in his storm-gray eyes. Sometimes there isn't one. The ambulance disappeared into the night, carrying its cargo of damaged souls toward something that might have been hope. Behind them, St. Mary's Hospital burned like a funeral pyre for the past, lighting the way forward into an uncertain but brighter future. In the end, they had all saved each other. Subscribe for more intense character-driven stories that explore the gray areas between right and wrong, where heroes are made not born, and love conquers even the darkest pasts. Comment below, which character resonated with you more, the disgraced surgeon fighting to redeem herself, or the wrongly imprisoned agent seeking justice? What would you have done in their situation? The end.